Well, we've now, I think, seen for the first time the biggest blunder perhaps committed by the Netanyahu government in Israel. I'm sure you've all seen the scenes, they've been on every television screen. These ones here.
These are the vehicles they were in when they were killed. The World Central Kitchen logo clearly visible on the roof of this car. The group were travelling in 3 separate vehicles. So what happened and why did they die?
Yes, that was World Central Kitchen. 3 vehicles, one after the other, targeted, apparently by drone strikes, which raises one question immediately. Are these drones operating on AI, on a sort of remote Hannibal doctrine program, that anything that moves in a particular area gets blasted? That's the sort of thing that happened, for example, on October the 7th, after the breakout from Gaza. We need to have that question answered, but it's a minor question in one sense. There are many more questions that get answered because of this, and what we have to be careful of is that we're not again lied to. We need, yes, there's been a call for an independent inquiry, which Israel says they'll conduct. No, they cannot. You cannot expect an independent inquiry from the Israeli state. It needs to be not just an independent inquiry, it needs to be a truly thoroughgoing inquiry, because this incident actually extends far beyond World Central Kitchen and even Gaza, right to the United Nations itself, its use, its misuse by big powers using their vetoes, etc. People, not just the United States and Britain, but also, for example, Vladimir Putin's Russia with China in tow, giving support to that murderous, possibly even genocidal junta governing Myanmar. Yes, it takes it very wide, but it needs to be wide, because here we have the opportunity in an investigation, a thorough investigation into what the background was and what actually happened with that particular attack. Because the World Central Kitchen in itself is a very interesting body, run by a celebrity chef called Jose Andres, who's Spanish, who happens to be, incidentally, a very good friend of people in the White House. Not only that, he's had a lot of dealings with the White House. And, of course, he is a firm friend of Zionist Israel. In fact, he actually tweeted support for the attack on Gaza. And even after his people, 7 people in WCK vehicles, were targeted and killed, he didn't call for a ceasefire. He merely called, he said it was systemic. They needed to change the way they operated. Otherwise, there might be more such tragic incidents. Perfectly true. It's a bit like, I think, summed up by that very good cartoon by Cape Town's Brandon Reynolds referring to Joe Biden. What he's saying is they need to behave themselves a bit better. But who is, not just Andreas, but what is World Central Kitchen? It's a small outfit relative to the bigger aid agencies. It was bringing in, perhaps it is estimated, as many as 100,000 meals for a day. 100,000 meals to 2 million people. 1 meal a day? Nonsense. That's a public relations exercise, very much like the airdrops by first the United States and then Britain. These are PR exercises, and one has to ask why. Interesting question. Another one. We've already covered in these podcasts the creation of a great big jetty off Gaza, built from the rubble, perhaps containing the bodies of some Palestinians. Who used that and who's it built for? Why it was built for World Central Kitchen. Why did they get preferential treatment? Did they get preferential treatment? They certainly seem to have. Does it matter? Nothing matters if people can get food in to people in Gaza or medical aid. Every bit counts. But not when you have hundreds, thousands of trucks sitting on the borders waiting to come in. And one agency, only one agency in the world capable of handling something on that scale. And that's the United Nations Relief and Work Agency. UNRWA was founded in 1948 in the wake of the Second World War, but also in the wake of that dreadful situation. Yes, the Nakba, the catastrophe, the expulsion of 750,000 or more Palestinians from their homes. This was unacceptable to most of the world in the wake of the Second World War, and therefore UNRWA was set up to look after these refugees, and they were classified refugees. In other words, not people who had voluntarily left their homes or decided to pack up and export themselves. No, refugees, meaning people who have been forcibly removed and who have the right to return. Therefore, so long as UNRWA exists, Palestinians legally, in United Nations terminology, exist and have the right to return, which of course is total anathema to the Zionist regime, and particularly the hardcore Zionists, the fascists like Smotrich and Ben-Gvir, let alone Netanyahu, who I think is just an opportunist who's trying to keep himself out of court and possibly out of jail and needs to stay in power. We must not be lied to again. We've been lied to so many times. How many of you remember these scenes, for example?
Cruise missiles and bombs brought tons of high explosive to the heart of Baghdad's administrative district. This was about demolishing Saddam Hussein's symbols of power.
That was shock and awe, the incredible attack on Iraq, based on a total lie that Iraq had weapons of mass destruction, a complete figment of the imagination of certain people who wanted an excuse to invade. But they used more than that, if you remember the other lies that went down at the time and have since been exposed, years later, unfortunately. One being this one.
Holy shit! Holy shit! God!
Yes, the Twin Towers. It was said that it could not possibly, even though the pilots who crashed those planes into the Twin Towers and into the Pentagon happened to be Saudi citizens of Saudi Arabia, and the attacks were claimed by and proven to be by Al-Qaeda, a group headed by a Saudi national, Osama bin Laden, and based in Afghanistan. It was ruled that Afghanistan couldn't possibly have done that, and Al-Qaeda, not without the help of who? Saddam Hussein in Iraq. Another lie. And it was swallowed by an awful lot of people. All sides of the House. Joe Biden, in fact, did as well. But you have, for example, Dick Cheney.
Compel Iraqi compliance with the UN Security Council resolutions that called for the complete destruction of Saddam's weapons of mass destruction.
Or Hillary Clinton. Not that it matters, but people everywhere started wondering what is happening. Why did we do this? Well, we now know. And George Bush maintained it was for the cause of democracy. This is what he said after the whole thing was over.
The transition from dictatorship to democracy will take time, but it is worth every effort. Our coalition will stay until our work is done, and then we will leave, and we will leave behind a free Iraq.
Well, he could possibly tell that to the perhaps 1 million Iraqis wounded, maimed, and killed. At least 200,000 died. Or even, for example, the nearly 10,000 American soldiers who died. And the result? Democracy in Iraq? I doubt that. Much the same, for example, in Afghanistan, where the American proxy of the Central Intelligence Agency, the Taliban, ended up turning against their masters and ousting them. Oh, take Libya. There's any number of examples. And of course, we can mention others like Myanmar with other players involved as well. We don't want lies, but we now have an opportunity with this tragedy in, whether it be a blunder, a mistake, or friendly fire, as one of the spokespeople of the Israeli government called it, friendly fire on the World Central Kitchen. We have the opportunity here to open up a proper, in-depth, wide-ranging investigation into what happened, how it happened, and the entire background to what is actually going on now. We have the opportunity. Whether we are able to use it or who's able to use it, who knows? But it's up to us, ordinary people perhaps, to put as much pressure as we can on those in power to ensure that we do get, at the very least, a decent, independent inquiry as to what went on.